Hey everyone, it's Karen. It's a new year, and I'm going to talk about last year's books because Christmas happened, and then I was on break for a bit longer, and so I read loads of really good books that I want to talk to you about. And the first one is called The Elissas. This is one I picked up at the Barnes & Noble sale before my little ban that I'm doing, and I just thought that the cover looked really good. I will hold up a picture of my journal here because I have someone else borrowing the book right now. But essentially it is a memoir written by this girl or this woman who grew up in a really affluent suburb of Chicago, which is a suburb I'm super familiar with based on where my first teaching job was. And she kind of got into trouble as a teen. She wasn't one of the most troubled teens, but she was kind of in that group. And she had this friend named Elissa who was quite troubled and went away to these different places to be healed. Basically, her parents spent loads and loads of money, like sending her to camps and treatment facilities and all this sort of stuff. And this book just exposes the whole troubled teen industry, which is this way that affluent parents are basically spending loads and loads of money for their kids to get help when they're into drugs or sex or getting bad grades at school or whatever constitutes a troubled teen, when really the whole industry is like complete child abuse. People die either at the facilities or later because they've been given this label that they can never escape. And so the story focuses on the journey this girl's friend takes, and you know that she does end up dying. But throughout the book, her friend meets two other friends, also named Elissa. They're all spelled differently. And so she's using her friend's experience to kind of expose the whole troubled teen industry. And I thought that it was really, really interesting, especially for something I have going on now that I, in my gut, feel is kind of similar. But I will say it wasn't really the best written. Like, her friend's experience was a little bit of a stretch, and it just seemed like she was like a bit obsessed with a friend more from a distance than from actually like living life side by side with her friend. And so what I will say is a better idea sorry, I have the flu. If you feel like this sounds really interesting, learning about this whole like scam for affluent parents and all this like child abuse going on behind the scenes when people are trying to help kids, that sounds interesting to you. What I would suggest instead of this book, which the book is fine if you want to read it, that's cool, I would suggest watching the documentary what is it called? No, Hell Camp. It was so much better. I can't talk. I have the flu. It was so much better, and it just did a really good job of covering all the same points, but just in a more professional way. And you get to hear many of the experiences from kids that actually attended these camps and things. So you can hear their experience and see what happened to them. And there's like former leaders that talk about like their perspective now on what they did to kids and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Watch Hell Camp. Okay, the next book I read was kind of a thinky woman book. So it's called A History of Present Illness, and it's by DeForest. And I have loads of tabs in here, which I wish I would have prepared better for this video and actually like figured out kind of the order to talk about them in. But basically, this is a novel which is written by a palliative care doctor. So I think it's really interesting when doctors write novels, because I feel like even though they're fake, that the doctor like knows stuff. And so this follows a main character who is basically like just starting her doctor journey. Like she's finished her classes and now she's like actually like being a doctor in real life. And it is just her thinky thoughts about everything she's encountering. So whatever she encounters, like in her medical work, like in a day of work, then it just like encourages all these deep thoughts that go off in this crazy direction. So it's like all these like rabbit holes that you're following, but they're thinky deep thoughts. And I loved it. And one of the quotes that I put in my journal is, when the world is sick, no one can be well. And I think that that is one of the examples of like a deep and profound thought in here that could be applied to, like, for example, Palestine right now. Like, when the world is sick, no one can be well. We cannot just focus on ourselves and be like, oh, all is well here, you know? Like, no, we're in this together. The whole world is connected, as you can see on BookTube. And yeah, this is just a really beautiful book. If you are interested in medical, strong women, think books. Then I read this book, which is called My Men by Victoria Kielland, and it's translated by Damien Seals. I think it's translated from Norwegian. Anyway, this book was good. It's a shorty. But I thought the premise sounded better than the actual book was. So basically it was super dark, and this is based on a true story of a Norwegian woman who comes to America and becomes a serial killer. Yeah. So that sounds amazing, and like this book is pretty good, but it's just I was just hoping for more, I guess. Okay. Then I read Unmasking Autism, which was super interesting. I ended up going into special education because I was so interested in autism and learning about it and discovering like all of these disabilities that are not your norm. Like, I think when people think of special education, they think of like kids with Down syndrome or whatever. And my mind was blown when I got into high school and I realized, no, there's autism, there's emotional impairments, there's so many other things that could put a kid in special ed. And just learning about how the mind works and all that more psychological stuff got me really interested in going into special education. And so this book on autism, I thought would be super interesting. Now, I have always said that I am not autistic, even though I have like loads of characteristics, like having special interests. And I told that to my school social worker, and she was like, girl, like you have interests I didn't even know were interests. So anyway, this book just kind of covers a lot of how autism can look different, and how there's a lot of people that don't even know they have autism until they're adults, just because of how big of a spectrum it is and how it can look so different than what we're trained to think it looks like. And so I did take a bunch of autism tests, and they were always borderline. So I do think I might have a sprinkle of autism. I'm not calling myself autistic or anything like that, but there might be a sprinkle in there. Anyway, that was another thing that I thought was really interesting, is this whole like, oh, you're autistic sort of a thing. Because when I was in college going for a special ed degree, we were always taught to use person first language. So that means instead of saying you're autistic, you would say you have autism. And I think it's really interesting how different communities change the way they want to be referred to and change the language they use based on how language has been used by like the oppressor or like groups in power over them. And so one of the things I've noticed just through YouTube videos and through this book is that a lot of people in the autistic community, which is a whole nother book that I'm reading about community and the use of that word community. Anyway, they actually right now are preferring to be called like an autistic person or whatever instead of a person with autism. So they actually don't want that person first language. And that's interesting to me because like I said, I'm not willing to say that I'm autistic because number one, I was just borderline for all those tests, but also like it's just not, I don't want to put that label on myself. But if I did, I would want person first language. And like, I hate it when people are like, oh, you're a diabetic. No, I have diabetes. I'm not a diabetic. So I think I tend to be still more in that person first language camp. But anyway, I thought this was really interesting and something I'm definitely going to think about a little bit more. Okay. And then I read a book that should have ended up on my top books of the year. This was recommended by Ann Novella, and it is Orbital by Samantha Harvey. I have so many tabs in this book. I would like to say that I'll come back and do a standalone review of it, but I don't know if I will. It was so amazing. This covers a group of people who are on the International Space Station, sort of rotating around the Earth. Seeing the Earth pass by over and over and over again. And it is a thinky book. So it's science fiction, but it's more realistic science fiction, I would say. And it really just covers so much on perspective. Like, I would say that perspective is probably like the theme of the book. But when you think about perspective, like, you will think that you have uncovered all the different ways that this book could discuss perspective, and then it just like goes into like another one, so you're constantly just having your thinking flipped from different angles. And basically like, here, I just made a list. Let me just go look at my list. So it talks about like trying to live in this world in outer space, but also still being grounded into the fact that like you're a human being and you're actually from Earth. So I thought it was interesting, like the things that they would do to anchor themselves. So like, for example, they would look at their watch a lot so that they could anchor themselves to like what time it was like on Earth at a certain point or whatever. And then they also kept going around Earth, right? So they had this view of Earth that's different from anybody that actually lives on Earth. And they would talk about how when they were communicating with people in their families from space, like they didn't know what to talk about because like some of the things that are most important to them when you're in an isolated place together with like 6 people or whatever, is like really mundane day-to-day things that just become so important because of your seclusion, but wouldn't be interesting to someone on Earth. And then other things are just absolutely way too profound to even like describe, like just your view of Earth and your view of the solar system and how small you feel and how giant the world is and all these like philosophical thoughts that you have. And then also just kind of like viewing the planet as like this safe place, and like watching natural disasters happen from outer space, and like they actually seem so small, but then actually they're really catastrophic for the people that are in the natural disaster. And then there was like a lot of discussion on faith and on the astronauts kind of disagreeing, some of them being like, dude, like, how can you be here and believe in God? Like, you're a scientist. And then others having the exact opposite, like, dude, how can you see what we see every single day and not believe in God? So that was an interesting thing to talk about. And then also, when I was talking about how the spaceship life was kind of mundane for them, there's also like physical objects that hold so much meaning to them, And I don't know if it's because they're so far away or, but just like the importance of things to kind of draw you to people that you love or ground you or whatever. And one of the characters had an experience of losing a family member while they were in outer space. Like, you can't just go be with your dying parent. And so this idea of like, what can you do? And what is going to bring you comfort and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I just thought there was so much in this book. Like, you could basically take one passage from here and write an entire essay or have an entire vlog or video just on that one section. Like, this is a book that I want to reread. And it was just absolutely beautiful. The final book that I read before the new year also has loads of tabs. But it is by Nastassja Martin, In the Eye of the Wild. And this is also a true story memoir of, well, the other one wasn't a memoir, but you know what I mean. I've read a few. This is a true story of this woman who is an anthropologist. And so she's going into the wilderness to like research things and do things. And she ends up being a little bit attacked by a bear. So her face is like falling off her face. And she ends up having someone like be able to rescue her and take her to the hospital and all that. And so she's like in this Russian hospital and they take care of her and all this stuff. And it's horrible and it's a really bad experience, but like, you know, she's taken care of and whatever. And then when she's like done being taken care of, or, you know, this is gonna take a lot of healing, but she's pretty good, then they like accuse her of being a spy. And so there's like all this other trauma that goes into this situation. And then she goes back to France, which is her home country, and they like basically like are really condescending towards Russians, and they think that the Russians did a horrible job of repairing her face, and so they need to redo it all. And like the truth is that the Russians actually know how to deal with bear injuries, bear mauling situations, where the French, even though they may seem like they would have better medical care and stuff like that, like they actually aren't as familiar with this type of injury. And so they really like try to redo everything, like re-break bones and do all this stuff, and they end up making a hot mess. And yeah, I think she gets an infection and like bad stuff happens. So it was just a really interesting short book, a good one for Shorty September. Actually, quite a few of these would. I think Orbital could be read for Shorty September 207, pushing it. But yeah, lots of these are Shorty September length. I would say any of these could be future Shorty September books, because you know you always need to be thinking about what you're going to read for Shorty September. Anyway, I need to go on a walk, I need to eat breakfast, and I need to go to work. So I will see you guys later, but I hope you enjoyed kind of the last few reads that I did of 2023.